Hello and welcome back to the Wandering Cantos. Today I want to talk about You and I Are Polar Opposites because, well, I just finished watching the first season and I have a lot of thoughts that I kind of just want to yap about. So that sounds interesting to you, get comfortable, get yourself a drink, and come join me in this little sort of mini review of the first season of You and I Are Polar Opposites. Also, as a quick note, there might be small spoilers for Horimiya and the Rascal Does Not Dream series, but they're really minor spoilers. But just wanted to give that just to be fair. So, to start things off, I just want to comment on the fact that one of my favorite types of slice of life romance or comedy is the anthology. I love when it feels like you're watching a large cast of characters where they get to interact with the world outside of the main plot. And it feels like time is actually dedicated to each character and their own personal struggles, arcs, and growths, etc. So many times it feels like there are just side characters who sort of cease to exist whenever the main character isn't on screen or around in proximity to them. But here we get to see a ton of characters as they live their lives separate from the two sort of main leads, Miyu and Yusuke. I feel like one of the only other shows I've seen that really sort of captures this anthology vibe that we see here would probably be Nichijou. And I haven't been able to check out the sort of spiritual sequel City yet, but I'm assuming it has a similar vibe. But I really liked that in Nichijou where you sort of had characters who you could argue are main characters, but then you also got to see recurring characters who are sort of living their own lives. And I loved how at the end of Nichijou there was the end credits animation that sort of showed all the different characters walking around the city doing their own thing, and we sort of get a similar vibe in the end credits to You and I Are Polar Opposites. One of the main characters I want to talk about is, I think it's pronounced Tara. I'm sorry if I'm getting it wrong, but I feel like he feels like a really good representation of how social anxiety might manifest in a guy character. Now, I don't know. I want to avoid anything controversial here because social anxiety and shyness and all that can manifest in a multitude of ways. So please understand that I'm not trying to, you know, lock things in by with one statement or make an overgeneralization or make this a gender thing, but I just wanted to make an observation about this character and how they feel in the genre at large. So, for example, Nishi is a very shy girl in this series who has a hard time speaking up and sort of tries to make herself as small as possible whenever in a room with people, etc. And she's a pretty good representation of how shyness and social anxiety is typically depicted in anime. She's shy, quiet, polite, nervous, and overly self critical. I can think of a ton of characters from other series who have a similar sort of vibe to this. Tara, on the other hand, feels like a good representation of another form of social anxiety slash shyness slash low self esteem. Now, obviously, his form of social anxiety can manifest in anyone, regardless of gender identity, but I do think he's a good representation of what we tend to see in high school aged guys. He's just as shy and self critical as Nishi, but this tends to manifest in a more standoffish, cynical way. And honestly, I found him to be pretty relatable, especially to how I was in high school. I feel like he sort of views any sort of earnestness in a social setting as a sort of vulnerability, which could lead to some sort of attack. And I also heavily relate to him being a little too self aware and a little too analytical for his own good. I especially related, for example, to his discomfort when he hears people laughing around him, since he always assumes that they are laughing at him. So, in general, I just thought that he was a really well written character and also sort of a refreshing take on the shy slash socially anxious character. And I can't really think of anywhere else that I've seen a character with this exact vibe in anime. So I really appreciated his inclusion. It sort of felt like a new trope, if you will, since anime tends to have so many characters that are basically, built on trope. Speaking of Nishi, though, I have to say, I feel like she sort of stole the show this season. At first, I was really invested in the main romance between Miyu and Yusuke, but pretty much as soon as she showed up, she became one of my favorite characters. And I especially really liked watching her relationship with Yamada grow. I thought they were a really sweet sort of friendship slash romance. And I thought it was really well written and well handled. And pretty much whenever they were on screen, I was super locked in and excited to see, their story continue to develop. I will say that I felt like the low point in the season for me personally was probably episode 6, which is the whole like high school festival arc. And so I don't know. I didn't really like the entire plot line with Miyu's ex-boyfriend showing up. And I saw that some people really liked this episode because it depicted jealousy well, and they liked how Tani was able to articulate his feelings and all that. But I don't know. It's like the show isn't bluey, if that makes sense. I'm not really looking for, good role models in that way in the show, and sort of those sort of wrap up of this is how you should express yourself. So I don't know. It felt like it added this weird sort of baggage to the relationship since Miyu had been technically lying to Tani. And maybe this is just my own moral compass, but just because Miyu says that Tani feels like he is her first boyfriend, it doesn't mean it's not lying to not mention that she technically did have prior experiences, especially because Tani, like, legit seems to have not had any prior romantic experiences. It seems like he hasn't even ever flirted before. And one of the other characters who seems to be, a pretty reliable character in the show, Yamada, he even points out that it's pretty unfair to act like it never happened. And by the end of this sort of struggle, arc, conflict, whatever you want to call it, I feel like Miyu ultimately ends up with the realization that her love is still pure despite technically having sort of a prior romantic experience. But I feel like what she really should have realized is that it was sort of weird of her to be kind of lying to Tani this whole time. Like, I don't have any problem that she had prior romantic experience, and also, I think it's valid to say that it doesn't fully count because it seems like it might have just been like an afternoon or whatever. There might have been a small time skip with how long it was because Yamada clearly like knows about it. All of that's fine. I just think it's sort of weird that she kept telling Tani that he was, like truly her first romantic experience and just also just never brought it up. I thought that was just kind of a weird thing. Because maybe I have the timeline wrong here, but I feel like at this point in the story, Miyu and Tani had been together for at least a couple months, which, like, in high school romance time is the equivalent to, like, I don't know, maybe a year. So it seems weird that it never came up. And again, I just want to highlight that I don't fault her for having prior experience or anything like that. I just thought it was weird that she was technically lying to him. And it kind of just felt like a weird moment in the show, especially because also then the next main arc was sort of Tani trying to get Miyu jealous, slash sort of liking that she might feel jealous. And I don't know. I just felt like, oh, that was kind of funky in an otherwise like super cute, wholesome relationship. Um, because of this and episode 6 in general, that sort of arc, I feel like for the next couple episodes, I wasn't as into the whole Miyu and Yusuke relationship for a while, but I still really enjoyed all the other characters and watching them go about their own sort of relationships and character growth and all that. But I mean, also to be fair, eventually I once again totally warmed up to the two main leads, and by the end I was totally cheering them on too. I think part of this weirdness is part of a larger sort of thing I wanted to talk about. So, something that's kind of weird about this anime is that it's one of the few stories I've seen where the characters start off dating. Like so many slice of life romances start off with the characters slowly getting to know each other, and the story usually ends right after a confession where they officially become a couple. And I think like you and I are polar opposites. Rascal does not dream of a bunny senpai, and Horimiya may be the only anime I've seen where the characters get together relatively early on in the story. And the thing is on the one hand, this is kind of fun since it's different and therefore sort of refreshing. But on the other hand, since the plot needs conflict in order to be interesting and in order to keep moving on, the conflict usually comes in the form of them having relationship issues. And so, like, I get that some people are going to be like, oh, well, it's nice seeing them have relationship issues since it's a learning moment on how couples should navigate these issues. And, this obviously happens in real life relationships. But again, like this isn't Bluey, and I'm not watching this show to learn how to navigate relationship issues where things wrap up with a nice bow and a lesson at the end. I don't know. Maybe I'm being a bit too cynical about all of this, but usually when a romance story ends on the moment of a confession, part of the sort of like euphoria of the ending of that story is imagining the characters going off into the sunset to live happily ever after. And it's kind of deeply funky to imagine them having to go to like couples therapy after like a month because, they keep having fights or weird incompatibilities after the story ends. Like you want to imagine that they go on and have like the perfect relationship. So with these stories, the relationship issues kind of make the relationships feel a little less cute than all of those other romance stories where it ends at the moment of confession, since with those relationships there's no actual canon of them having a fight within their relationship, because any sort of conflict that they have beforehand is when they're still friends and they're not dating, and usually it's just a big misunderstanding and it's less that they have to like talk it out and negotiate their feelings in their relationship, and again kind of have couples therapy, if that makes sense. Like I would technically say that like Yamada and Nishi honestly feel cuter than Miyu and Yusuke because they aren't having couple problems yet, because they aren't a couple yet. Like when they're having a difficult time discussing things with each other because one's an extreme extrovert and one's extremely shy, it feels more cute because it's like, oh, they're learning how to be together because they're not even a couple yet. While when you have a group that's already a couple and they're having communication issues, it's a bit more funky. And again, I get that in real life, real couples have communication issues, and that doesn't mean it's a bad relationship or anything, but within the realm of fiction, it's just a little less satisfying for me personally. But those big points aside, I kind of just want to rapid fire off a couple extra points. And so I have a little list here. So Uzume, I think this is how it's pronounced, she feels like a character based on like the lore of Lana Del Rey songs, and I kind of love that. I also thought Honda was being mean like the entire show when she was like puckering her lips, because I like misunderstood her original introductions, and I thought that she was like resentful of the fact that Yamada was kind of using her to get closer to Nishi. But then I rewatched that introduction and I realized it was more like she was trying not to like smile slash laugh at the obvious flirting because she didn't want to make Nishi like more self-conscious, which is actually like really cute and endearing. And as a side note, I need her weird like neck brace thing that she uses to watch live streams, because I think that would just be awesome for watching hollow live streams. I also loved how, as I mentioned earlier, the end credits showed all the different characters moving around. It was also cool that it actually showing different moments from the show, because it doesn't actually spoil it like so many anime openings usually do. And it was actually kind of weirdly satisfying when a moment in the show would happen, because then you could, associate it with the little tiny like doodled version ending in the end credits, because the art style is different, but it's kind of like, oh, that's what that was referencing. And I just thought that was kind of fun and sweet. And then also speaking of animation, the animation of this entire show was so good. This channel we usually focus on the writing and the stories, but I want to take a moment to just really appreciate how like vibrant and colorful this show was. I think like the only other anime I've ever seen that has like this much color is probably Words Bubble Up Like Soda Pop, and that's one of my favorite anime movies. And it actually has a very similar vibe in terms of the story and the whole polar opposites thing as this show. So I would definitely recommend that movie if you haven't seen it yet and you like You and I Are Polar Opposites. I think you would really like that one. And then, as a little final note, I think Watanabe is one of my favorite characters, and I hope we get to see more of her in season two because I feel like every friend group needs a person like her. And in a way, I kind of like, I look up to her sort of outgoing nature in life. I feel like one of those things they always say with like social settings is that like the best thing you can do is sort of just like not care and just try to have fun. And she really embodies that and kind of proves that like that is the key to happiness. But yeah, I think that's going to sort of wrap up my little yap session about You and I Are Polar Opposites. I kind of just wanted to get my thoughts out since I just finished the show and I wanted to get it out before I sort of forgot all of my thoughts and feelings on it. But yeah, let me know, what your thoughts are on this show. I'd love to hear if you sort of agree or disagree on, especially sort of my arguably hot take about episode 6. I don't know if everyone loved that episode or if I'm actually the majority and just don't realize it. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. And yeah, if you like these sort of anime sort of season reviews, let me know because I'd like to make more of these in the future. But your feedback helps a lot with sort of steering my content. Yeah, but with that being said, I'm just going to wrap this one up. So take care and I will see you in the next one.